What is resistance? Well, resistance happens both when you're on the right track for your own destiny and the highest version of yourself, but also resistance happens when you're on the wrong track. And so it can get kind of confusing for us because as humans, we always want things different than the way that they are. And that is the literal source of pain. It's like you have a God energy in you, if not your identity, but you have this energy, the same energy that's in the trees, that causes them to grow every single day without somebody waking up and telling them to produce leaves and grow. It's this life force. And you have a life force in you that wants you to become every day better and better at the things that you set your mind to do and who you are and the roles that you're playing in your life as a friend, as a father, as a son, as a brother, as a business owner, as an employee. You have all these roles that you're playing, and there's this life force in you that is constantly causing you to desire and hold yourself accountable with guilt and condemnation if you don't continue to work on becoming the best version of yourself. So we meet resistance in two situations. One is you're following your heart, you're going after your dreams, you're setting huge goals, and the universe seems to bring obstacles and pressures and hindrances to the things that you seek to accomplish and to become. And on the flip side of that, if you're off track and you're not following your heart and you're being influenced in the wrong way, you're going to have resistance on that path as well. Both resistances are God. So what are the causes of resistance? And then what are the byproducts of resistance? What does resistance create? So the fundamental breakdown of resistance is the fact of the reality of what is. And right now, what is the current affairs of your life, the money in your bank account, the relationships you have with your loved ones and your wife and your partner, whether you're single or not. All of these are facts of the as it, of the what is, of the things are as they are, right? And you're seeking to change those realities. You're seeking to get wealthier, to have better relationships, right? In particular, let's say that you decide that you want to write a big book, or you set some kind of a big goal to build a business or do something, productive in the earth. What happens is the as is, the what is, comes against you because you're trying to change it. So it takes energy to convert anything into something else. When water is being turned into ice, it takes energy to do that conversion. When ice melts back into water, it takes energy to do that. When you digest food, it takes energy to digest that food. So everything is an energetic occurrence. So if you want to create something that isn't already, it's going to take an energy conversion to cause that to take place. When your car is going down the road and the engine is combusting internally, causing pressure to push the gears so that the axle spins, that is an energetic change. It takes energy to do that. Right? And you're burning the gasoline, the fossil fuels to produce that energy. So when you set a big goal, you are going to come up against natural and unnatural resistance. First of all, the resistance in yourself of becoming a higher identity than the one that you are. So there's internal resistance. There's these paradigms and these mindsets that we have about our identity and who we are. And when we go to stretch that and change that, our internal way of being begins to press back. If you have momentum in a thing, it becomes easier to internally maintain. if you decide that you want to lose weight and become extremely fit, that is a changing of what is. Your body is the way that it is. Your habits are the way that they are. Your eating habits are. So to insert discipline into a new diet and a new gym routine, you're going to face internal resistance because, well, your body does want to sleep in the morning. And no, your body doesn't if you go to the gym in the morning, or if you decide to go to the gym after work. No, when you get off work and you get in your car and you're driving home, you want to continue that route to go home and have that glass of wine or that beer. But you have to divert from your normal routine to go to the gym. Well, the first week of that is excruciating sometimes because you have these internal clocks that are just going, and you're trying to interrupt that and create a new habit. And that's an internal resistance. If you want to build a company that helps millions of lives, one of the first resistances outside of the internal resistance is going to be resistance of others. Anybody that you share your vision with that doesn't have the divine vision themselves or the capacity or the faith, they're going to shoot down, whether knowingly or unknowingly, your goals and your plans. You're going to go to bankers and people asking for finance and capital, and they're going to say no. So you have the resistance of others, right, that you have to overcome. You have to first overcome that internal resistance. Whether it's not truly believing that you can be the kind of man that can have the thing that you want, right? You have to overcome that, the internal resistance. And then there's the resistance of others, right? And then there's the resistance itself of the way the reality is, and you're trying to change that. And then there's spiritual resistance. And I'm always careful at Multigen Mindset Institute and Multigen Church. We are very careful to talk about, what is in the spiritual world, whether you believe in demons or spirits or spirit guides and angels, because some religions speak of it and some don't. Scientology doesn't necessarily speak of demons per se, but they treat an internal demon as a trauma, right? The Christian Bible, the Christian faith does speak about angels and demons, and that when you go to create something big, those spiritual forces will come to trigger you and to cause you trauma and to try to disrupt you. And you'll notice spiritual occurrences. And it is a reality that there are spiritual occurrences, whether it's influences or not. In the book of Thoth, Thoth is up there. He talks about there actually being brothers of darkness and brothers of light. And these are spiritual beings that have their purposes here on earth. And you're either on one team or the other. And when you get on one team, that team supports you. So if you get on the Brothers of Light team, the Brothers of Light will surround around you, whether it be angels or spiritual guides. I will say there's more religions that speak to spiritual beings than there's religions that don't. That's all I'll say, is the past 10,000 years, every religion that has ever emerged in any form, more of them talk of spiritual beings that help and cause resistance than the religions that don't. So regardless of, we have to consider in the conversation of resistance, we have to actually consider spiritual beings. As an example, last night I was out in the desert and I was praying about the Multigen Home of Hope, which is basically a foster care business for young teens that I want to start. And that last night I went out into the desert and stayed in the desert really late, or stayed all night to seek God and sit around a fire and pray. And this lunar halo, which is a very, very rare lunar occurrence. I actually didn't know it existed until last night. But I was laying beside the campfire and I was looking up at the moon, and it was a full moon. I did not know that it was actually the fullest moon of the year. And as I'm laying there, I see these clouds start forming in a perfect circle. And I'm looking up there and I'm like, that's not a natural occurrence. That's not supposed to happen. And I see these clouds and they eventually form this perfect geometric circle around the perfectly full moon. And it stayed there for about an hour as I was praying and seeking God. And I just felt the whole universe just pour onto me as far as support and help and encouragement and acknowledgement. And I went to sleep like feeling the Holy Spirit and feeling God and my endeavors, and knowing that I'd been seen, acknowledged, and supported. But then when I woke up in the morning, I immediately had a negative message from somebody that has been causing problems for me the past like 6 months. And it's a contractor that used to work for Multigen Wellness. And I knew immediately that the universe, the negative forces or whatever, had sent that person it was at 5 a.m. to send me a negative message, so that it would be the first thing that I saw when I woke up. And I had a choice when I woke up, was to go on that emotional ride of the trigger of what that person was trying to do to incite me to anger and frustration and rage, and to disable my abilities to do my pursuits. So I immediately took it to God and said, I know that this person has reached out and done this to me because of what occurred last night. And so I notice the spiritual side of resistance. I notice, and I can tell divine grace and divine favor too. So when you commit your plans, so let's say you come up with this big plan to create something big that helps people, and you go about the action steps of making that plan, show up in the universe, on the world. What's going to happen is that you're going to have these resistances of different versions pop up, and then you're going to have these graces that also pop up, and these graces are help in a time of need. And there is promises in the Bible and in Thoth, and also in the Book of Mormon, and also in Scientology, those 4 religions, that say you will be helped, you will not be left alone, and the universe will match you action for action, word for word, if you're going in the direction of positivity, and that you will be supported, and that you will not be abandoned. And all the religions on earth speak to this. And so for me, I rely on that. And that's what I call partnering with God in your business. And it's that I'll make business plans, and I'll see visions, and I'll make targets and goals, and then I'll commit them to the highest good for all humanity. I'll commit them to God, and I'll say, hey, if this thing is not divine, if this is not what you want me to do, then take it. But if it is, support me and make it swift and powerful, right? So we are always trying to become better than we are in this moment. And it's not only the pressure point of change, but it's also the pressure point of pain. Because when we're overweight and we want to lose weight, that hurts. When we are out of money, or we need more money and needs aren't being met, that hurts. When we are lonely and we want a lover or partner, that hurts. When we're in a job that we don't like, or a condition or situation that we prefer to be different, we're violently aware of the difference, then we are sitting in a place of uncomfortableness and pain. And so it's really strange how you get over resistance. And now I truly understand, after understanding this topic, what the Bible says about turn the other cheek. Because if you fight resistance, it will continue to show up. And that's why it says, don't turn the other cheek. Let God take vengeance and put things in his hand karmically. Yes, you need to defend yourself, and I'm not talking about the extreme of your house is getting robbed and you don't shoot the person. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about setting goals to become better and more than you are, whether it's businesses, relationships, money, whatever it is, and then resistance coming to keep that thing from unfolding. And then you notice that the thing is a challenge, right? So when we are very, very aware that our preferences are not getting met, there's an opportunity to get uncomfortable, upset, or angry. And as Abraham Hicks says, you can't want something and then be angry that you don't have it and then get it. It's the wrong equation. As she says, you can't get there from here, because the starting place of getting over resistance is here. And it's appreciation, gratitude, and calling out on faith and grace. That's how you meet a resistance and overcome it, as you flow with it. There's this saying that I'm not sure who said it, Muhammad Ali maybe, but he said, you move with water. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee is what Muhammad Ali said. But there's other teachings about becoming like water, which is probably the most powerful force on earth, is water. Water can carve out an entire mountain, and water is powerful in that it matches the shape and form of that and where it is and where it's going. And so water being so malleable is seen to be a very powerful force. And when you face resistance, you are offered a choice of frustration or flow and appreciation. The trick when any resistance, whether it's another person, internally, or whatever, to get over it, is to merge with it. And what I mean by that is through gratitude. And that has to do with a mindset. So the way that you prep yourself and set yourself up to be able to overcome resistances is through gratitude and asking the question of, how can this help me? How can this become a benefit? How can this make me stronger? And so when you are facing resistance of some kind and something's getting hard and frustrating, the way to merge with it is to take it inside of you and say, whether it's somebody attacking your business online, like I faced this morning, the lady had left a negative review on one of our businesses, right? She has no reason to do that, but she did it. And so my question to myself is, how can this make me better? How can this help me? Well, you kind of got to do a mind flip sometimes because, now I have an opportunity to choose to get angry and frustrated and go on some tantrum trail of calling the person and cussing them out or threatening them or calling the lawyers or whatever. The right action would have been just screenshot what took place, send it to the lawyer, and move on with my next thing. Or I could have gone on an angry rampage, right? So we are faced with a choice when resistance comes to have faith and move forward in gratitude and gratefulness, or to succumb to the resistance by going on its ride. What I mean by a ride is that any resistance of some kind is inviting you to go on an emotional ride with it. And you don't want to go on any emotional rides but your own. So the way that you merge with a resistance is by taking it inside of you and simply asking the question, how can this be of benefit? And we see in stories in the Bible where one of the prophets of God, or whoever he was, had been given a thorn in the flesh, and it said he was given the thorn in the flesh to keep him humble so that he didn't get proud. And we don't know what the thorn of the flesh was. I think it was described as a demon or something that was sent to torture him, or it might have actually been some kind of like a limp leg or a broken knee or something that was a long-term struggle. And I don't remember exactly, so I'm sorry, but he had been given some kind of ailment. And he had prayed and prayed fervently for it to be removed. And God said, I'm not going to remove it because it causes you to depend on me. And so the first byproduct of a resistance is the fact that it causes you to reach out towards a higher being. It causes you to reach out for help. And that's when you can resist going on the ride in the invitation of the resistance or the person or whatever's happening, and go on a faith ride and reach out to God and ask for help. And that is the primary purpose of challenges in our life, is to cause us to not rely on ourselves completely and fully, but to rely on the universe to match us action for action and word for word when we're going in the direction of our dreams. And I think that's a beautiful place to be when you're surrendered, you're full of faith, you're courageous, and you're going after your dreams. And then you're meeting resistances and you're turning them over to God and asking for him to give you strength to get through it without getting angry, resentful, mad. And it's when you get into those lower emotions, the way that you know you're getting taken on a ride by some kind of resistance is when you get into anger, resentment, blame, victimhood. So we know through the emotional tone scale, which is taught by David R. Hawkins and is also taught in Scientology, that the emotional tone scale is that somebody is in a channel most often, and there's a home channel for a person to be in. And those are emotional tones. And so if you're seeking after your goals and your dreams and you're full of faith and courage, and then bam, something happens to knock you down or stop you or block you. Okay, so what is the invitation? The invitation is to not get sucked into and to be taken on a ride into the lower emotional tone scales, but to rather take it to God and choose forcefully to go up and respond to it in a positive tone scale. So I'm in the desert. I have this amazing spiritual night. There's this lunar event that for me confirms that I am in God's path, that I am protected and guided, and that the thing I was praying about, which is Multigen, Home of Hope, was something that was registered in the universe and needed to be brought into fruition. And then I immediately wake up at 7 a.m. to have my world screwed up because somebody's, taking negative actions against me online. So that was an invitation. I could get angry. That's a lower emotion. I could get resentful. I can get into blame or get into victimhood, right? Those are 4 emotions that I was invited to go down this morning by the resistance. Instead, I thanked God that I was reading the negative comment they said, and I texted screenshots to the lawyer, and then I committed it to God, and I said, you know what? I recognize that this is an invitation to choose a higher emotion than to be taken on a ride by a lower one. So I chose gratitude. And I don't still in this moment know why, but I chose to be grateful for the thing that person did, because it challenged me to choose faith and choose happiness and choose joy and choose courage. That was it. The thing, the stimulation, the stimulant, the thing didn't matter to me. What mattered is how I handled it. And that was the challenge. So that's how everything becomes your teacher, is you ask the right questions and then you choose the right path. How can this thing help me? How can it make me stronger? Well, that event made me stronger because I was faced with an invitation to get angry, resentful, blameful, and in a victimhood state. And that was my invitation. However, I chose faith, courage, gratitude, and asked the question of how this thing can make me stronger versus being taken on a ride. And that there was a flex. That was me exercising my divine ability to choose my human experience, regardless of the stimulus, which made me stronger. So resistance is part of us living in a duality-based universe. Light and darkness, strength and weakness, right? We live in a universe where there's always an opposite, and they work in tandem together. And so for me, resistance is only part of what has to occur for me to change reality and cause things to be that aren't already, and to call things not as though they are, just like Jesus did. So I invite you in this moment to take a look at the resistances that are coming up against you and the goals and dreams that you have, and to work with those resistances to allow them to make you stronger by your choices and how you handle them and the questions that you ask about them. Because there are keys to life, and this is one of them.